Mr. Samuel Shepherd, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me. Came across one of your podcasts you did and was just blown away with the whole conversation, honestly, on so many different levels. My friend, Dr. Petra Davlar, sent it to me, and it was just like, wow, we need to examine this and dive in. So I reached out, and here we are, very excited to have that conversation. And if you will, give us that little introduction, because your introduction is a massive part of the story and why we're even here of having this conversation.
Yeah. Um, um, I spent most of my life in research. I've got several patents, about 44 international and domestic patents, but primarily focused in the environmental field and the Department of Defense. I was a consultant for electromagnetic pulse weapon design, auditory weapon design, and bioweapons. And I did that for a decade and got very good at it. But I may have gotten a little too close to something I shouldn't have gotten close to. But in 2003, I got diagnosed with incurable bone cancer, a cancer called polycythemia vera, and it's a bone marrow blood cancer. Mine manifested itself in the form of generating huge amounts, out of control amounts of red blood cells. So I went through all the coronary testing. They thought I had coronary artery disease. My blood pressure at times would spike to 280 over 160. I was probably going to have a stroke or throw a blood clot to my brain or to my heart or to my lung. And so they tested me for all the obvious stuff: atherosclerosis, arterial disease. It all came back negative. And then I got a phone call on a Sunday night to be in the doctor's office at 7:30 Monday morning. If you ever get that call, it is not good. So I went in, and he proceeded to tell me that he had bad news and that I had a cancer that starts in the stem cells of the bone marrow. And I asked him, I said, well, what about chemo or radiation? Because that was the standard protocol then. And he just shook his head no. He said, there is no cocktail, there is no protocol for this. There's not many people that had it at that time. It was very rare. There was no research funds spent because there wasn't enough people who had that cancer to make it profitable for the pharmaceutical company to do any research. So I said, well, what's my options? I said, how long will you live with this, or can I live with this? And he said, in your current condition, you have 10 minutes to 10 years. And I said, he said about 97% of the people will perish within 10 years. And I said, well, what about the 10 minutes? And he said, in your current condition, your blood is so thick, it was like pumping ketchup. And I actually got an enlarged heart out of it because my blood pressure chronically was held at a pretty high level and my heart enlarged. So off to the hospital I went, and that was my first phlebotomy. And it goes back to the old environmental solution games we used to play. The solution to pollution is dilution. So I would go in every month and they would take my blood out and they would let me build back up again. And that's how I did that every month for 4 years. And I realized that at that 4 year period, um, it was having an impact on me. When they take the blood out, a little bit, it messes with your electrolytes. You don't think properly, but I could feel my heart pounding in my ears at night. It was very difficult to sleep. I was into AFib. I knew the end was probably close. And it truly was one very dark morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a loaded 38. And I didn't want to have a stroke or be paralyzed, and my family was going to have to take care of me. That I'd already grown up with a grandmother that we kept for 3 years after she had had a stroke. So all of this was sort of playing in my mind. And at that time, no one really knew, other than my doctor, that I was dying. I had contracts with the federal government. I didn't want any, because nobody's going to do business with a dead man. That's as blunt as I can make it. And I knew that. So I didn't tell anybody. I figured I would just keel over and they'd find me. But then the realization that this is going to probably damage my brain. I'm paralyzed and somebody's going to have to, I'm going to be dependent on somebody. So God and I got really close. Like every day, I would walk for an hour and talk and trying to work through what this was and meditate. Um, it truly came to me almost like an epiphany. God gave us everything here on this planet. I was a trained scientist. Evolution was a big part of our training, or biological training. In chemical engineering, we 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 learned how the entire universe worked. So I had all the tools in the toolbox. I felt in my own mind that I could figure this out. If anybody could figure this out, I could figure this out. So it just came to me, there's got to be some animals on this planet that don't get cancer. And at that time, I was placed in a position where I had access to a database called ProQuest. ProQuest was a military database, wasn't available to the public, had all the information of the known universe in that database. I think that's where AI is actually drawing from now, is remnants of that same database. So I queried it and asked for all of the animals with no known recorded cases of ever having cancer. And the answer came back with 5 animals: salmon, pink flamingos, sharks, elephants, and naked mole rats. And at that time, I was working on a project in San Diego at Scripps Oceanographic, and Scripps had done a lot of work on this. So they had the tissue samples. So when I queried them as um, to analyze these animals and tell me all the molecules that exist in all 5 of those species, that includes lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, enzymes, anything biological that should be in those animals. I wanted to screen those out. And I wanted them to find molecules that is found in all 5 of those species, but isn't indigenous in any of them. There's no reason for it to be there. So that was the screening algorithm. And about 4 months later, I got a phone call and said they found one. And that one was called Astaxanthin. So they told me where it came from. It came from an algae called Hematococcus pluvialis. I promise, Logan, there won't be a test, so you don't have to remember all this. But so I began growing that algae in my backyard in one of those Intex, I call them hillbilly hot tubs. I'm from Appalachia, so I so so I went and bought one, and I put a cover on it, and I got very good at growing that algae. And I would float it out, skim it off the surface, dehydrate it, and I knew it was 3.8% astaxanthin. So for a specific dose, I knew how much of that algae I had to eat. So I started out at about 4 to 5 milligrams a day and calculated how many grams of algal biomass I had to eat. So I did that for a while, and since it's a very red algae, it's extremely red. Usually red things are poisonous. So I was sort of going down this path that this is probably pretty toxic. And so I monitored my blood work, my liver, my kidney function. And after about 2 months, 3 months of taking this, I noticed my blood work was actually improving. I was borderline pre-diabetic, so I was probably a 6.2 on my A1C. So I started taking this, and my A1C dropped down to about 5, and my blood work was looking sort of normal, except my hemoglobin was still climbing out. So without taking it, we call it the control, but without taking the astaxanthin, in about 30 days, I had to be phlebotomized every 30 days. So then at 4 to 5 milligrams a day, my phlebotomies got pushed out to about once every 2 months. Statistically, it wasn't significant, but it wasn't killing me either. So I was still hanging in there. So I thought, okay, everything's looking pretty good. Why don't we just triple the dose and see what happens? So we went to 12 to 15 milligrams per day. And my phlebotomies got pushed out to once every 4 months. Statistically, that was significant. And now I had 3 slopes of the curve. I had to control how quickly my hemoglobin climbed out over a 30-day period. Then I had 4 milligrams, and then I had 12 milligrams out over 4 months. So from the slopes of those curves, I could calculate how much do I have to take so that I'm never phlebotomized for the next 50 years of my life, assuming an asymptotic curve. And that's pretty conservative. So it came out to be 96 milligrams a day. So I started taking 100 milligrams per day, and my phlebotomies ended. My doctor was shocked. He called it at first a natural remission, and then when we got into it, he said, "This is somewhat miraculous." He said, "We don't have any cures from this type of cancer, and this type of cancer leads into leukemia. So the cancer will start attacking organs, and then that's what kills you. If you, in my case, my blood pressure was probably going to kill me, but in that case, it completely leveled out. My hemoglobin became normal, and was diagnosed in 2003. I started the astaxanthin in 2006, 2007, and so I spent from 2007 to 2015 trying to figure out why did it work. I had all the tools to figure this out, and I taught biochemistry and biochemical engineering. So a lot of it was textbook, trying to put together the biological pathway as to what was really going on here. So I knew all about astaxanthin. I knew its ability to donate electrons to free radicals. I understood free radical chemistry. I had several courses in free radical type chemistry for initiation to make polymers like polystyrene, polyethylene, polystyrene. So everything sort of coalesced. At the time I'm in the polymer business, I had no clue about the biological side. I was only involved in the production of plastics. And then I moved into the biological side of it. And the knowledge I had on free radical chemistry became very important because I became an expert in understanding how free radicals initiate and attack double bonds and the importance of free radicals from a biological point of view. So I went down that path very quickly. It was very matter of fact that's where the science was leading me. So then when I began to look at the biological side of it and not so much the engineering side, the biological side had these free radicals called ROS, reactive oxygen species. So there are basically 5, but I'm going to focus on just 4. Those 4 that I focused in on was superoxide, singlet oxygen, the peroxyl, and the hydroxyl free radical. Now, Logan, those may be on the test, so make sure you. But what happens is these are 4 free radicals generated in our mitochondria. Anytime we consume sugar, glucose has a lot of these OHs, oxygens attached to the glucose molecule. Well, they have to go somewhere. And if when the glucose is converted to energy, it generates these OH free radicals. Now, it turns out when we're young, and women, average age of 42, and men at age of 50, younger than, in our 20s, our teens, our 20s, our 30s, we have 3 cellular antioxidants that our body produces. We have glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase. And we can do a lot of stupid things when we're young and get away with it. We can smoke cigarettes, we can drink beer, we can stay up late, we can chase women, we can eat pizza. There's a whole bunch of high risk things that we can do, but our bodies are protecting us because of these cellular antioxidants. Well, for women after the age of 42 on average, nature shuts off glutathione production. We don't change our bad habits. We don't change at that magic age how much we drink, how much we smoke, how much stress we're under. So all of a sudden, the balance gets out of whack. We're generating all these free radicals, but when we're younger, we're all taking them out at the same time. And then what happens? This goes away. This stays the same. This is the onset of age-onset disease. Those 4 free radicals cause 92% of all human death. That was a game changer. That's what opened up all of this, is that if I can stop the chronic effects of these reactive oxygen species, then heart disease goes away, atherosclerosis goes away, no more cancer, no more arthritis, no more type 2 diabetes, no more Alzheimer's, no more Parkinson's, no more MS. They're all related to inflammation, and those 4 free radicals are the main culprits. The best analogy I have is almost like a big oak tree. You got roots in the ground, and that's where we get our reactive oxygen species from. So the roots might be radiation exposure, it's diet, it's sugar, it's too much beer, it's smoking cigarettes down in the root structure. And then it all comes up to a trunk of the tree. That trunk is ROS, reactive oxygen species. Then the trunk goes up and there's branches that come off of the tree. Those are the symptoms of the disease. Doctors stand on the ground and they treat the tips of the disease. What ValAsta does, or what this compound is that I found, we cut the trunk off so that diseases never manifest themselves. And that's the game changer. So I began to give it to family and friends, and some of these were stage 4, 2 to 4 months to live, 3 to 6 months to live, less than a year to live. And their cancers went away in 60 days. And that really got my attention. And I'm going, there is really something to this and to this biochemistry. And there was a few people up in the Washington area, high-level people that were in stage 4 cancer. We had prescribed it, given it to them. Their cancers went away. So I was asked in April of 2019 to go and present there in Washington. There were a bunch of senators, representatives were there. Ben Carson and his staff were there. And the 5 majors, John Hopkins, Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, Mayo, and the Cleveland Clinic had all sent representatives to this presentation. It went on for a couple hours. And I explained to them why we get disease, the chemistry behind why we get sick. And they were shocked. Afterwards, a doctor from John Hopkins come up to me and he said, you have this figured out. And I said, yeah. I said, I think I now know why we get disease. And he said, I tell you what, he said, I am a gatekeeper for all the money that moves from Congress into the National Institute of Health. He said, I'm going to go ahead and allocate some money into this research. And I volunteered. I said, well, I'll help you. I said, you don't have to pay me. I said, I'll come and help you. And his comment was, no, you need to go away. And that at first took me aback a little bit, but I realized he wanted the research to be independent. I'm not going to take a nefarious attitude about why he made that comment. But so he obviously allocated money, and I wasn't a part of it at all. But now there's over 1,000 peer-reviewed articles of the anti-inflammatory disease and anti-cancer protocols of using astaxanthin. Now, not all astaxanthin's the same. When I was eating the algae, I was truly eating the basic form that existed inside the algal cells themselves. So I thought it'd be clever as a chemical engineer to extract the astaxanthin, get it in a more controllable, concentrated form, something that I can understand. Not, I didn't want to deal with algae that was grown in different water qualities or different sunlights and all that. I wanted to eliminate all those variables. So the way that you do that is just deal with the molecule. So there was a unit operation called a CO2 supercritical CO2 extraction process. So we were able to extract the pure astaxanthin, the red astaxanthin carotenoid directly from the algal species. So I began thinking that would be a much better way. Instead of me eating a pound of red algae, I can now just eat a few grams of this concentrate. Well, when I did that, my phlebotomies returned. So I kept increasing the dose. I was doing 100 milligrams a day. And when I switched from eating the raw algae to the concentrated form, it started to go back up again. I watched my hemoglobin climb every month, getting higher and higher. So I just kept increasing the dose. I got well over 800 milligrams per day before it bent over and started to come back. Now, if I ate the algae, I ate the equivalent of 100 milligrams per day. If I got the concentrated form, which I thought would have been, it was totally counterintuitive, I had to be well over 800 milligrams of the pure stuff. So there had to be a difference between what was in the algae, the raw algae, versus what it was from the concentrated form. So there had to be something in the unit operation, that process, that changed it. It either inactivated it, which is what I thought happened. I just deactivated the potency of the astaxanthin. So we did a mass spec. I looked at the algae in the form in the biomass, and it was in two separate forms. One was called glycosidic, the other one was called liposomal. Now, the glycosidic and the liposomal is you actually have a glucose molecule chemically stuck to the astaxanthin. It looks like a tadpole, a molecular tadpole. On the liposomal, the fatty acid portion of the lipid would react with the OH on the astaxanthin. So you had this fatty acid stuck to the astaxanthin. They weren't physically separated. They were chemically attached. So it truly was a different molecule. Well, when I analyzed in the biomass, it was all chemically attached. I found out afterwards that that's how the algae can move it to its cell membrane to block the sunlight from burning it when its pond dries out. That's what actually makes the algae produce this antioxidant. So when we did the CO2 supercritical extraction, we crack the sugar off, and we end up with a pure astaxanthin. Pure astaxanthin is not absorbed through the small bowel as readily as the glucosidic form. And we knew that from bioweapons development too, like sarin or ricin. If you want to get it into the body very quickly, you put a glucose molecule on it, and you truly could rub across somebody's arm, and in 3 days they would die. So um, we knew that chemistry, and it's probably in one of these books back here behind me. But um, so what I did is I took the pure astaxanthin, and I chemically attached the glucose back onto the astaxanthin. And that product is called ValAsta, ValAsta. It's patented. It's the only patented natural supplement that's ever been allowed. So the patent office approved it, and the title sent ripples of the title of that patent. It's a method for the process of using astaxanthin for the treatment of inflammatory disease, particularly for the treatment of cancer. And that changed everything because, as you know, the FDA requires disclaimers. It says this product cannot be used to treat, diagnose, or cure any disease. Now I've got the patent Department of Intellectual Property stating you got to put the title of the patent on there and the patent number, and it says you can use this product to treat inflammatory disease. So let the people choose whatever they want to believe. So they John Hopkins, I believe it was, there's over 1,000 peer-reviewed articles on this. So if you want to search these programs, you can just search NIH, National Institute of Health, and astaxanthin, and whatever disease, cancer, heart disease, Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, and they've got all the research completed. But the pharmaceutical companies control the research. Standard doctors do not. Doctors rely on pharmaceutical companies to educate them. This is going to cut deeply into the revenue generation of pharmaceutical companies, because if now we can prevent disease, it changes the entire paradigm. There is a blood test now called an HSCRP, and we want to keep that number under 3 milligrams per liter. Under 3 milligrams per liter, that's called natural inflammation. We have to have an inflammatory response for our cells, our chemokines and cytokines to communicate. But anything under 3 is non-disease. Anything over 3 means that you are going to get a disease. It might be arthritis in your fingers, might be irritable bowel, it might be Hashimoto's, it might be thyroid, it might be a brain tumor, glioblastoma. You're going to get something if you're over 3 milligrams per liter. It's just a matter of time. And the ValAsta knocks that number down and keeps it down, so you don't get a progression. I'm 73 years old. I have nothing. Thank God. I don't have any arthritis. I power lift. I lift weights. I don't have anything. And I'm sort of shocked, about it.
Well, when I heard your podcast, I was excited, because I think that you have actually found, a massive, massive, massive piece. I think that, and I wanna walk through this. I wanna walk through the story you just laid out. I love it. Like, I absolutely love the story. I came to where what we're about to get into because in 2019, my little boy was 5 and diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, right? So I have been relentlessly trying to understand cancer and what the mechanism, because I have not been happy with the answers I've gotten on what is cancer. I think every one of them is incomplete. And I think that when you laid out the myriad of different maladies, they're all connected. And I think that you started this again, and I think this is where I really want to start laying out what you just said in that story. Um, with you said I may have got too close to something, right? So the electromagnetic aspects of what was going on is extremely important. And so, like when you read "Going Somewhere" by Marino, right? That's a really important book. Looking at Robert Obecker's work, right? We know that these electromagnetic frequencies are going to have an impact on biology. What we didn't know is why, right? And so as you're going through this and you're talking about you hit on mitochondria, right? Like Doug Wallace laid this out, Samuel. Like this is heteroplasmy. Like as we age, we have a reduction in heteroplasmy. We also know with like Russell Ritter's work that melatonin's actually goes in there with superoxide dismutase, glutathione catalase, right? Catalase is a heme based produced by the mitochondria. Like there's so many different things right there that connect to what you're saying as we go through. So before we go into more of the mitochondria, because I think that you have figured out something that I don't think that you even fully appreciate how amazing it actually is. I'm super super excited about this conversation and what we're doing. So what go back a little bit to the disease cause. Like to me, and I want your take on this. Is I think it's environmental. I think that we're in these artificial environment. If you look at what I was just saying about melatonin, right? This is an antioxidant. It's a natural circadian based antioxidant that's actually produced by the mitochondria, 95%. So we destroy that with blue light, right? We destroy with our main, heme protein, that's a photoreceptor as well, catalase. So when you're talking about all these things, like I see the connections and I don't think everybody else
The
would.
layperson doesn't.
So what I want you to go into a little bit more of the most fundamental because you keep saying biochemistry, but I think that you even have much more of the biophysics foundation that you're not putting out there because it's harder to understand. So can you get into those fundamentals? What is causing disease a little bit more?
Sure. I can, and I don't know your audience well enough yet, but let me go through how these diseases are caused. You hit on it. Some of it's environmental. So some pesticides, for example, it's not the Roundup that causes any disease. It's the inflammatory response to the glyphosate that causes the disease. It's not the COVID virus that makes you sick and kills you. It's your inflammatory response to that virus. So we respond to these cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine in the fight or flight reflex. If you're under a lot of stress or you're worrying, your body is producing those steroids, those hormones. Well, it will get you out of a short-term fight or flight reflex. You'll run faster, you can lift cars off of babies, that kind of stuff. But there's a payback time. And from a physical or a kinetic point of view, that epinephrine and norepinephrine that you generated from your adrenal glands goes to the liver. It's metabolically degraded. And in that metabolic degradation, you generate a huge number of these hydroxyl free radicals. That's your inflammatory problem. Cortisol does this. So worry generates more stress. More stress generates more epinephrine, norepinephrine, or cortisol, or adrenaline type molecules. But when they have to be taken out, so when your liver processes those, you get this huge hydroxyl free radical, and it's measured by the C-reactive protein. C-reactive protein is a molecule produced in the liver when you're under stress, whether it's environmental stress, whether it's just biological or physiological stress, whether it's too much fructose, too much sugar. Your mitochondrial metabolic rate gets exceedingly quick and fast, or you need a lot of energy. Fructose is probably what is killing most of us, believe it or not. And it typically was in high fructose corn syrup. That's where we really got alerted by it. And I can go through the epidemiological reasons as to why fructose is such a poison. And it is a poison. There's not a single cell in your body that can use fructose. But fructose is where we get the desire for sweetness. That's what drives our sweet desire for disease. It's fructose. So, up until 1966, cancer deaths were 1 in 50. After 1966, the cancer rate went up to 1 in 3. So I knew something happened in 1966, 1967. When we went back and looked at it, Lyndon Johnson needed money to fight the Vietnam War. Congress wouldn't give it to him because there was no declaration of war. So he had to get money from somewhere. So what he did, he went to the USDA and he told them he was going to cut off their corn subsidy because he was going to use that money to fight the Vietnam War with. Well, the USDA says you can't do that. You'll bankrupt all these corn farmers. So the USDA countered and said, if you allow us farmers to enzymatically produce fructose and introduce it into the food supply, we will forego that subsidy. And they all agreed. That's what originated the current state of disease we're now in. That was the point at which it changed in our food system. Since then, we have other processed foods that when we metabolize those in the liver, they also generate free radicals. There are dyes, there are chemicals, preservatives that we add into our food. Bobby Kennedy is aware of all this. Every chemical we put in our body has to be metabolized through the liver. And some enzymes do it efficiently and some enzymes don't. And that generates an inflammatory response. I have probably 100 kids aged 5 to 12 with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So what's causing it? It's caused from sugar. Sucrose or table sugar is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. So every bit of sugar we consume, 50% of that is now inflammatory. Glucose is used by every cell in your body, with the largest amount of glucose going to the brain. The second largest user of glucose are your muscles. Fructose can't be used by any. Fructose is the source of all cholesterol. It's not animal fats and oils. Never was. It was fructose. So when fructose concentrations begin to increase, it goes to the pancreas. The pancreas converts it into triglycerides. They called it the COPS disease because cops always had a problem with their cholesterol because they spent too much time in donut shops. That was always the going joke. But when your triglyceride level gets high, your liver says, I've got to store this energy somewhere else. So it takes the triglycerides and converts it into LDL cholesterol. That's the bad cholesterol. That's where we get cholesterol from. We've been all fed gobbledygook for the last 50 years. And it's about time that they flipped the food pyramid because a meat diet, meat and vegetables. I don't eat any fruit. No more fruit. I haven't for probably 30 years. I might have had a grape or something at some gathering, but it's not even close to a major part of my diet.
So I want to, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly. It's a massive problem. I think that the mitochondrial conversation plays into that as well, right? So like to me,
does.
I have maybe a little different perspective on food. I own a grocery store. I own a farmer's market. Like this is what I do. I'm into regenerative agriculture, building out food systems, all that good stuff. But when I look at it, and this is why I want to go back to the biophysics, is I look at all food being a photosynthetic barcode. Really, it's just broken down into protons and electrons that go into the electron transport chain. So this is why I want to go back to the astaxanthin within the mitochondria. My opinion is what you have found is actually a mitochondrial photonic and magnetic buffer for the entire system. Like when biophysics comes out on what you have created and put together, I think it's going to just go to another level. When you go say and because we can't forget that reactive oxygen species or reactive nitrogen species are magnetochemicals. We have magnetochemistry going on, especially complex 2 with the flavins. This is a whole magnetic piece that we're not paying attention to, and we are not taught in medicine at all. Also, complex 4, the CCO, it produces water. So if we're eating high carbs, fructose, we're not producing adequate water to insulate the entire system, because the water piece is another one we don't pay any attention to, and it is massive and fundamentally. So what the astaxanthin is doing, in my opinion, is we are also mitigating excessive ultra weak biophotons, UPEs. And this goes back to Fritz Popp and Van Wyck and the work when a cancer cell generates more biophotons than a healthy cell. So in an unhealthy cell, astaxanthin, you hit it, it's a red color. It's a changing mechanism to change from the sun, protect from the sun. I don't believe that the sun's causing problems, but I understand in that state where it's dehydrated, it can absolutely cause a problem. So that goes right back to the mitochondria. In a dehydrated state for the mitochondria, because we're not producing enough metabolic water at complex 4, now we're even having more of a problem with these highly proliferative magnetochemicals that are going on, and we have no way to buffer it also because we don't have enough melanin to buffer the system because we're never out in UVB to build it, right? Because it's bad for us. The astaxanthin is actually this is why I got so excited when I heard you talking to Brandon. It is helping to buffer the entire system that should be working properly if we had light, water, magnetism, temperature, and time laid out for our mitochondria to be healthy.
Yeah, let's go back. You've lumped a lot of stuff together. It it's electromagnetism, but it's also electrochemistry. They're interrelated. But with your water analogy, when the OH from the sugar is generated in the mitochondria, and it's generated as an OH with a zero charge. Water is HOH. It has a hydrogen attached to the OH. But when it's generated without the presence of water in a mitochondria, you generate these free radicals. And the free radicals just means that there's an unpaired electron in the outer orbital. So when I look at the oxygen with a hydrogen attached to it, it has 9 protons and it has 9 electrons. Well, when you run through the electron diagram, you end up with 1 electron not paired in the outermost orbital. That's called a hydroxyl free radical. No matter what it touches, it is going to steal an electron, and what it stole that electron from itself can become a free radical. So it's just a cascade transport phenomenon. Okay, so now cancer requires a lot of sugar. Most of the sugar that cancer lives off of is produced by our own liver. You cannot starve cancer. Cancer has priority over all the sugar your liver produces. So every night, your liver produces 80 to 90% of all the sugar demand your brain needs and all your muscles need. But cancer has priority because it has more glucose channels. It uses 16 times more sugar than a normal cell just to stay alive. So in that rapid mitochondrial glucose reaction, you generate a lot more of these hydroxyl free radicals because you're consuming so much more, 16 times more sugar. Now, these are in the form of OH. Well, these OH free radicals will migrate to the outside of the cancer cell. Cancer doesn't want to get its DNA destroyed either. So you end up with this huge, slightly acidic environment outside the cancer cell. Now, that slight OH free radicals have a pH of about 5 to 6.8. It is acidic. Well, that acidic pH kills adjacent normal cells, and it makes room for the cancer cell then to grow. It's creating space. So when the astaxanthin and the way that the ValAsta works is cancer sees that glucose that's attached to the astaxanthin. Well, that cancer wants that sugar. So it pulls it in. Since it's chemically bound, it pulls the astaxanthin intracellular, inside the cancer cell. The enzymes crack the glucose off, and the cancer uses it for energy. But now the astaxanthin is inside the cancer cell. And when it sees an OH free radical, astaxanthin can donate an electron without itself becoming a free radical. Or the OH will attach to the conjugate double bond of the astaxanthin and neutralize it. Now, if the OH, zero charge, plus an electron from the astaxanthin, it becomes an OH minus 1 because it has one more electron than it does protons, and electrons are minus 1 charges. So this OH minus 1 is alkaline. It carries a pH of about 12. Well, if you've ever watched your grandmother make soap with lye, that's how you make soap. You take animal fat or tallow and you mix it with caustic, and it makes soap. Well, the phospholipid membrane of a cell is lipids, it's fatty acids. When the pH gets above 7.4, the cell membrane is saponified, becomes water soluble. It completely disintegrates, and the cancer cell dies in 4 seconds. That's how we think it's working. The astaxanthin also has a reactive end, an OH end, that can stick to the what's called a PD-L1 of the cancer cell. So about 40% of all cancer cells are PD-L1 positive. And Dr. Allison won the Nobel Peace Prize on this in 2018, I believe, 2019. The astaxanthin molecule will react with the end of the PD-L1. The reason that's important is the PD-L1 is the defense mechanism that keeps your immune system from identifying and killing that cancer cell as a foreign body. So that the T cell, which covers every cell over a 24-hour period, sniffs every trillion cells in our body. When it comes down, it has a PD-1. If the PD-1 makes contact with the PD-L1 of the cancer cell, your immune system runs away. It won't kill it. But if I inhibit that reaction and the T cell comes down and it cannot make contact with that PD-L1, it will kill that cancer cell in 2 to 3 seconds. It's violent to watch under a microscope. So there's two methods of kill that we've been able to identify with the astaxanthin, the glycosidic form of astaxanthin. And it's called a Trojan horse concept. We trick the cancer into taking the glycosidic astaxanthin directly into the cancer cell. Once inside, then it's over in a very, very short period of time. Your blood pH can never change beyond about 7.35. You cannot alkalize your cells. That is a myth. So the only way you can alkalize it is at the cellular level. You can't carry it through the bloodstream. So your blood pH can never change. If your blood pH goes to 7.3, you're in trouble. You're sick. If it goes to 7.4, you're in trouble. So you can't get the alkalinity from your small bowel into the cell via your bloodstream. Now, but you can introduce carotenoids and antioxidants that carry those electrons directly to the cell, and they, at the cellular level, will cause an alkalinity, an OH zero charge, which is acidic, to an OH minus 1 charge, which is extremely alkaline. That's where it happens. That's why carotenoids are so important. The peppers are so important. Anything with color, we should be taking.
So I want to hypothesize something within the process you just explained, the saponification of the membranes, right? We know from the work of Barry Ninham and Hans Vink that cancer cells hijack the glycocalyx and make it thicker. So what it sounded like to me that you were describing was that saponification process was disrupting the glycocalyx so the T cells could see and recognize the cancer cells and were destroying it. I think that's an
Yeah,
amazing mechanism.
yeah. The extracellular matrix that's formed in that chemistry. is a real problem with cancers like pancreatic cancers, for example, and some of the brain cancers. So you have to break that down. So now what's happening is these hospitals and pharmaceutical companies are looking at a two-flanking attack on cancer. They're using chemo, but they're also using ValAsta. And this is 1 + 1 = 3 because the astaxanthin opens up that extracellular web matrix that cancer is very good at building it around itself. When that happens, the astaxanthin opens that up and allows the chemo then to go in and disrupt the DNA of the cancer cell. That's a whole other chemistry, a biochemistry that's being compiled and being looked at. The most studied one is one called gemcitabine with astaxanthin, and it was used to combat and stop pancreatic cancer. That's where everybody woke up and said, "Oh my golly, cancer is already operating on an edge." And with somebody who has cancer, that's hard to understand that cancer is right on the edge between life and death. It is struggling, trying to stay alive. The cancer cannot handle a two-frontal attack. So when you hit it with and decrease the gemcitabine resistance that pancreatic cancer will actually put up with that extracellular matrix, when you break that down, now the gemcitabine can go in and kill the cancer. That is a whole new science that needs to be studied very carefully because it's effective.
Listen, I have been I have not been this excited about a podcast that I've listened to in a long time. I'll tell you, because things started popping for me as you were explaining and going through. I
Well,
think that's
you'll
about
lose sleep over this.
yeah. No, I'm tickled. This is all I do. Like cancer's my world. I just trying to cure it is all I really I spend the majority of my time doing. So what one more thing. I know because we got to wrap up, but one one I want to highlight something else that you said going back a little bit when you were talking about Johnson. I think that we also can never ever ever forget what happened with SV40 and the polio vaccine within cancer, right? We know SV40 is one of the most carcinogenic viruses ever. So in that 66 time period till Nixon declared the war on cancer in 71, we had a huge, huge problem, right? This goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning, military complex, what work that you did. I think there's a lot of things that we have simply had the wool pulled over our eyes and not addressed. The Cutter incident is not something that is hard to fact check, right? Like what I'm saying about SV40 is not something that we can, uh, you know, like it's not a conspiracy. Like it's happened. It's right there. But what I want to specifically say about that, it's my understanding that we are suppressing P53 with SV40, right? And T antigen is having an issue. We're not able to destroy the cancer and stop. So P53 suppression. I don't necessarily think astaxanthin's working on that mechanism, but that is a very, very important mechanism to consider within the context of this conversation, I would think.
It is. It is. And we now know that at the DNA level, the guanine is the lowest oxidation potential of the amino acid on the DNA. That's the one that's being attacked and being mutated. That's the one that's kicking off the P53 issues. Now, I'm more interested in prevention because if you keep your HSCRP less than 3 milligrams per liter, your likelihood of getting an inflammatory disease is probably less than 3% over your entire life. Oh, and it's not the virus, it's not the bacteria, it's not the UV radiation from the sun. None of those things cause directly cancer. They are the initiator of it. So inflammation, let's take COVID, for example. We got the virus. I have viruses all up and down my spinal cord. Every virus you've ever had in your life, whether it's chickenpox, herpes, CMV, whatever it is, still resides in your spinal cord. It's not killing you. It's when it creeps out, when your immune system breaks down as you get older, for example, and you get shingles. When your immune system breaks down, those viruses will migrate out and try to regenerate itself. It's that step that astaxanthin stops. It's that inflammatory response. You can never kill the viruses. If you got cytomegalovirus from mononucleosis or herpes or COVID, those viruses are still in you. And that's the problem with long COVID, is that we don't have the the antigens to actually degrade it. And the proteins that are being read from the RNA are accumulating in our capillaries, and that's what's causing the inflammatory response, because any tissue that loses blood flow or oxygen activates interleukin 6 and says, I have something blocking me. I have something inflammatory going on here. Your immune system responds and it can kill you. Your immune system is a pretty violent animal. And I've seen it under a microscope when I'm going, I don't ever want to be on the receiving end of a T cell or a macrophage. It is violent.
I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we can follow up and keep diving in, but I'm all in. Like this is something I've spent a lot of time on since I heard your podcast. But we're going to continue because I feel like this is a huge, huge, huge part of it. And I want to keep diving in. Hopefully we can circle back and just keep diving in on some of the biophysics pieces as well, because
Excellent.
this is a big deal. I am a huge, huge fan of the potential here and obviously what's been published and what you've accomplished. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Logan, for having me.
All right, brother.